everyone, and welcome back to Fuse Games Conference, a completely online and free conference from Staffordshire University's Games Department. Our next guest is a talent acquisition manager at XR Games who brings a wealth of experience in games recruitment and is today going to be talking to us about how to get into the games industry. So welcome, Andy.
Morning, afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Additionally, alongside us both, I'm going to bring in my colleague Stephen Cunningham, one of the lecturers here at Staffordshire University, who's also going to be helping along with the stream. Good afternoon, Stephen. It seems to be on mute, Stephen. Anyway, we'll slowly move on. Andy, so you've come today to talk to our students and anybody that's watching the stream about how to get in the games industry from a perspective of you as a talent acquisition manager, what you're trying to look for, how to get in. Let's get going. Yeah.
Sounds good. Yeah. Cool. We've got screen up. Excellent. Thank you, everybody, for watching. First of all, yeah, as mentioned, so what I'm going to do today is talk to you a little bit about how to get your first job in game development, and I'm going to be kind of giving you a bit of a behind the scenes look as to how it works from a recruiter's point of view. Actually, what are the steps that take, and really, how can you give yourself the best chance of working in video games? So first of all, let me tell you a little bit about who am I. Why should you bother listening to me? Why should my what I'm saying today take any notice? So as mentioned, I'm talent acquisition manager for XR Games. That basically means that I run all recruitment for XR Games. Been there for just over 2 years now. I see every single CV, every single application, portfolio, everything hired. Pretty much most of the company at this point. I also was responsible for launching something called XR Futures, which is XR Games' own talent development initiative. It's our way of being able to offer internships and graduate roles and apprenticeships and doing loads of L&D stuff and basically getting involved in helping people get a job in the games industry, whether that's with us or with somewhere else. Overall, I've got just over 9 years experience in recruitment, both in games and just in the wider tech industry. So once again, I've seen a lot of stuff. I've seen a lot of applications. I've seen a lot of people do bad, people do good. Hopefully I can bring some of that experience and share it with you today. Previously, my previous job was also, I used to run a non-profit called Grads and Games, which you're probably aware of. So I was there for just under 3 years. Grads and Games exists to help students get their job in the games industry. So that was working with thousands of students, but also hundreds of different studios around the world, lots and probably thousands of different developers, gaining loads of advice and kind of collating that and being able to be the voice to be able to provide to students. I also guest lectured. I've taught at Falmouth Uni for a little bit, where I helped teach their professional practice modules. Once again, it's all about preparing for industry and being able to get a job in industry. And you regularly find me doing talks like this, start at events like EGX and that kind of thing, and at unis and doing things like this all the time. So that's me. Hopefully that gives me enough kind of background to be able to confidently give you some info today. So first of all, let me give you a bit of an intro to who XR Games are, because you may not have heard of us. So XR Games is a VR game development studio based in Leeds. We are just over 6 years old. We turned 6 in December. We've shipped 8 games so far, and we currently have 3 games in development, all of which are set for release this year. So we've got a very big, exciting year for the business. We work with people like Meta, Sony Pictures, PlayStation, lots and lots of other IP holders that I can't talk about, which would give the game away. And we just recently announced our latest game last week. So last week we announced, in collaboration with Rebellion, we've got Zombie Army VR coming out shortly in 2024. So I'll quickly show you the trailer so you get a flavour of what we do. not sure if the audio is working on it. So that's Zombie Army VR. That's coming out over the next few months. Very excited. First game that we're releasing this year. On. There we go. So look, what I'm actually here to talk about today. So the kind of things that I'm going to cover with you today is regarding generally advice and guidance for getting a job in the games industry, whether that is with XR Games or whether that is with anyone else. This isn't specifically to talk about getting a job at XR Games at all. I'm going to talk about the skills that studios look for in both artists and designers. I'm going to be talking about portfolio advice. I'm going to be talking about what you can expect from the recruitment process. How does it actually work? What steps are in place? What can you expect? And ultimately, how you can smash it and get a job. But first, I do always begin these talks with a bit of a reality check to begin with. The first thing you need to know about getting a job in the games industry is that it's really hard, right? And I feel it's important that we're upfront about this. It is super hard to get a job in the games industry. What you will find is that probably many of you who are listening today are studying games or seeking a career in games because that's what you've wanted to do, right? Since you've been a kid, you've grown up playing games, and now you've got an idea of what you want to do as a job, and you're trying to follow that career. You are not alone. Most kids nowadays are growing up playing games, and now that games careers are a lot more visible, lots and lots of people are going to study and aim to get a career in games. However, there aren't as many jobs as there are people studying. The industry is hugely overpopulated with job seekers at an entry level who are looking for those jobs. Now, what that means is that just being good at what you do is only half the challenge of getting a job. So there are fantastic people who are great artists, great designers, great coders who do not get jobs in the games industry because of the sheer numbers that they're playing with. Just being good at the fundamentals of your job, of whatever discipline you're going for, is not enough. You also need to be aware that it might not happen straight away, and that's okay. Many people will graduate uni and it might take them 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years maybe afterwards before they actually land their first job in the industry. And that's actually much more normal than you might realize. And the reason why I tell you this is because if you are in that position, or if you find yourself in that position later this year where you've graduated and you've tried to get a job for 6 months, you've not got anywhere, that's not the time to give up. If that's what you really want to do, that's not the time to give up, because actually you are in the majority when it comes to that. I also implore you to treat your career like a journey. And so what I mean by this is that all of you here might have a idea of your perfect job. So it might be working at a particular studio, or on a particular franchise, or on a particular type of game, or whatever it is, right? It's personal to you. It doesn't, you don't need to tell anyone. Now, the chances of you getting there first time, probably pretty slim, right? You're probably not going to get your dream job as your first job in industry. Say your dream job might be working at Rockstar on GTA 6, right? That's what you always want to do. That's why you want to get in the games industry. Chances of you getting hired by Rockstar in your first job and getting put on that project are very slim, because they will get a humongous amount of people applying for those roles. And that doesn't mean that that your goal needs to change. What I would do is treat your career like a journey. So take it step by step. Any experience you get in making video games, working in game development, whether it's on a franchise that you're not, personally you're not really interested in, whether it's working in a genre that you're not really interested in if you were a player. Any experience you get allows you to take a step closer to whatever it is your goal is in your career. And the key thing is as well is that the work that you do outside of uni can and most probably will be more important than your coursework. If you just do the bare minimum of doing whatever you need to pass your degree, your course, whatever, you are doing the same as everybody else. And there are hundreds of people applying for the same roles at an entry level. And so doing more, working on personal projects, doing game jams, doing other stuff that we're going to talk about, all of that work becomes super, super important to you getting a job. So that's a negative over, right? I'm going to try and be a little bit more positive from here and try and tell you actually how do you do it, so it's not all hope is lost. So let's talk about basic skills. None of this should be new information to everybody, right? So game engines, first of all, games made in game engines. There's no getting around it. You need to know your way around game engines, regardless of what discipline you're going for. You're going to have to use a game engine at some point. Unreal and Unity, your two main ones. Don't get too caught up on which one you have to use. It doesn't really matter at this stage in your career, to be frank. Different studios will use different engines. Other studios will have completely different proprietary engines that no one has a chance to have a go at. It doesn't really matter for an entry level role. They're not looking for anyone who's an expert. You cannot be an expert at this level in any of those. Just knowing your way around how to use engines in general is going to be good. Tools, obviously, with art, that there are a million different tools that you could potentially use. I've listed a couple of them there, but once again, don't get too hung up on I must know this or I must know that, because once again, it doesn't really matter. You will learn that once you get into the job. What you'll find in a lot of studios is that actually most studios will just use whatever tool is best for the job at the time. They're not particularly married to, we only use this. That's not really the case for a lot of places. So just being adaptable, being able to pick up new things, knowing your way around some general industry standard tools is going to be the way. The basics, stuff like your artistic ability. So, this should really be the fundamentals and reason what you're building upon while at uni. So this would be your understanding of composition and color, lighting, shadow, movement mechanics for like animation, all of this kind of stuff. We should be able to see pretty clearly that you've got a pretty good understanding of in your work. And then your soft skills, super duper important. And I'm going to really go into more detail later about why they are. But being able to communicate, that's both written and verbal, being able to work with other people, being adaptable, as I mentioned, being eager to learn. All of these things can really make a difference when you are looking for a job. And yeah, your understanding of the games industry and game development, not just games. There are millions of people around the world who love games and love gaming, right? Millions and millions. Not all of them know how to make a video game. They can't talk about the game development process. And so you need to make sure that you are able to show that you do know the difference and that you are looking at game development as a job, as a career, not just I like to play video games and I want to play video games all day. That's not what the job is, right? Portfolios. So in general, for junior roles, it will be the first thing that someone looks at. It'll be when an application comes across, it's pretty much the first thing that someone clicks on. But you might only get an initial 30 seconds of my time. Now that sounds really, really harsh, right? But there's a reason behind it. If we are advertising for a junior role, we will get hundreds of applications, right? And we're not a huge studio. Bigger studios will get even more. And what that means is that there's a number of different filters that go in place, right? You have to go through these applications, you have to filter through to be able to get to a long list and a short list, etc. And so the initial look will be, a quick glance. Have they got the relevant things that are needed for this job? And that might be 30 seconds. It doesn't mean you're not going to go back later and do a second look, which might be a bit longer, and a third look, which would be even longer, to properly analyze your work. But initially, you just need to pass the 30-second test. And what that means is that it's your responsibility to make sure you get the basics right. So I am talking about making sure the link works that you put on your CV, making sure it's really easily accessible and really easy to find on whatever you apply with, making sure that it's simple layout, make sure that I can find exactly what I need to see straight away, trying to reduce any adverts and distractions, getting to the point. If it's a portfolio, we don't need to know your life story of where why you've ended up doing this. I want to see your work. That's what I want to see. Not password protecting stuff. It's very unlikely, for junior roles that you're going to have stuff which is under NDA. If you do, then obviously, that's not something you can put on your portfolio. But there's no really reason to password protect. All of these things can provide a potential barrier to someone looking at your work. And the reality is that if it comes through, and if I can't get access to it, if it doesn't work or whatever else, I might have 200 others that I need to go through that afternoon. The chances are probably not going to email you and say, hey, the link you sent doesn't work. Can you have a look and send it back to me? Or you didn't send a password for this. It's just not going to happen. It's just going to be straight onto the no pile. There's a no and a maybe pile at that stage for that 30 seconds. So you just need to make that as easy as possible for recruiters to be able to see. Artists. So I'm going to kind of talk a little bit more about specifics for art and designers here. So art portfolios, really just use ArtStation, right? You don't need to make your job any harder than it actually needs to be. You don't need to go and create any websites using any other thing. You have a platform that pretty much every artist in the industry uses. It's recognizable. People know how to navigate it easy enough. Just use what's available if you're not already. And this might sound super obvious, but showcase actual game art. And so what I mean by that is you are applying for a art position at a game studio, right? Presumably to make game art. So make sure you show off that. While other pieces of art could be nice additional touches, so whether it's more kind of traditional stuff or life drawing or photography or that kind of thing. If your portfolio is got loads of that stuff and is full of it, and there's only maybe a very small amount of actual game art, I'm going to assume that, well, game art is kind of a side thing, and actually your main thing is doing this. What I want to see is showcase actual game art, showcase stuff that is rendered in an engine, stuff that is optimized, stuff that will play, it isn't going to completely fall apart and break. Showing this understanding of what you are making for a video game is really key here. There we go. In engine, gameplay screenshots, put stuff in context of wider scenes. So that's a particular kind of personal pet peeve for me, really. So you get a lot of people who do lots of props, and they'll make props, and they'll be like, "Here's a thing," and there's just a grey background. There's nothing. It's just right. Here's the thing. Here's a chair, right? For argument's sake, and that's great. But if you really want to showcase actual game art, then place that chair in a scene. Right? You don't have to make the whole scene. You can use someone else's scene. You can use whatever you want. But show me why that chair looks the way it does. Why is it coloured in the way it is? Why is the style the way it is? How did you get to that point? Why, it's not just you've come up with it in thin air. This is why it is. And a lot of people do it. A lot of people they'll just make something completely on the fly, and that's not how you work in industry. You don't do that kind of thing. So showcasing the context of why your piece looks the way it does, really important. Showing your process, as I kind of mentioned, we want to see your research, we want to see your mood boards. It kind of goes back to the previous point. Credit other people's concept art if you've used them, all that kind of stuff. But really, the main kind of golden rule, I guess, for art portfolios is that it's always quality over quantity. Having more pieces on your portfolio does not make it a better portfolio. A lot of people fall down the trap of not really understanding what their portfolio is. Your portfolio isn't a back catalogue of everything you've ever done. That's not what it is. In the context of you looking for your first role in the games industry and using your portfolio to get you a job, your portfolio does not serve as a back catalogue. I, quite frankly, don't need to see stuff that you did 2 or 3 years ago because I probably assume you've got better. It needs to be a sales tool. It needs to be able to showing exactly what you can do right now. It needs to be a representation of who you are. Whatever, if you did stuff 2 years ago, what I would suggest you do is reflect on that and go, if I did that piece again, would I do it much better? If the answer is yes, then it probably shouldn't be included on your portfolio. That might mean you only have 2 or 3 pieces on your portfolio, and that's fine. I've seen some great portfolios that have only got 2 or 3 pieces on. You don't need to have 10, 15, 20 pieces to have a really good portfolio at this level. Make sure it's a representation of exactly who you are and what you can do right now. Variety will be a thing that helps you get a job, and this kind of goes back to kind of a point at the beginning about treating your career like a journey, right? So you might have a specialism. It might be a particular style or whatever. Do you know what I mean? And that's fine and that's great. So, like for example, you might want to do really kind of photorealistic cars, right? And you go, that's what I want to do. That's what I'm passionate about. I love doing that. And you have a portfolio and you've got 5 or 6 different cars, and they're all as realistically modeled and whatever as they can be. And that's great. But you apply for a job with us, you can see the art style on the screen that we do. We don't do that kind of stuff. It's a no for us straight away. It's an immediate no. Lots of other studios have been the same. If they don't do that kind of thing, if they don't do those kind of games, if they don't do that kind of style, that kind of art style, it's an immediate no. And you might say that's fine. Well, I didn't want to work for them anyway. But what if the places that do those projects? What if you don't get hired there either? Right? Because the competition is massive, right? Just because you specialize in it doesn't mean you will definitely get a job there. You might not get a job there either. So thinking back to what I was saying before about treating your career as a journey, having variety will help you get your first job in the industry. And it might not be the job that you really want to do eventually, but it is a job in the industry and it will help you moving towards that. So I would suggest having different kind of art styles, different kind of, maybe doing different kind of props, different kind of, different kind of things, different kind of settings. Just play around, show some variety, show that you can do some variety, and you will then open up your options to more studios who might hire you, because studios will generally pick out, oh, that's the bit that's really relevant to us, and I really like that, so yes, we'll do an interview. Now, it's say whether you end up doing, you might stay there for a year, 2 years, and then you move on to do what you really want to do, doing realistic cars, and that's fine. But you're in a much better position because you've then got a year, 2 years in the industry. So variety will be one of the things that helps you get a job. Show off what you can do. Be original, be creative. Let's say don't just do kind of copies of other people's stuff all the time. It's a creative industry at the end of the day. We want to see that you are a creative person, and be really clear when it comes to descriptions and write up. Right, so we want to know how you made it. We want to know what tools you use. We want to know what engine it works in. We want to know how long it took you. We want to know all the specs. We want to know that. Once again, it shows that you understand game development and you understand the actual process. And finally, look, don't compare to your classmates. So, there'll be there's a really common thing with students where you'll be in a class with 30, 20, 30, 40 people, right? And you're all in the same boat and you'll be comparing work and you'll be going, and in your head, and you won't say it out loud, right? But you could say 2 things. You could look at someone else's work who's next to you and you could either go, oh, theirs is so much better than mine. I'm miles off, right? And I don't know what I'm doing. I've really, I'm really off the ball here. I've got no chance. Or you might look at their work and go, mine's much better than theirs. Like you won't say it out loud, obviously, because it's rude. But you might say in your head, I think I'm good here. Theirs is terrible. Mine's much better than theirs. Now the problem with all of this is that probably neither of you have a job. So neither of you have a job. It's not really a proper comparison to make. So what I would say is compare with the right people. Do some research. Have a look at people who graduated last year or the year before and are now working in the games industry. Their portfolios probably haven't changed very much. They'll probably be roughly about the same. Have a look at what they do. And once you start looking at 10, 20, 30, 40 different portfolios of people who have got, a year or less in the industry, and you start comparing the quality of your work to theirs and your portfolio to theirs, you then start building a picture of, okay, this is what works. And actually being honest to being able to reflect and go, I'm not quite there yet. I need to do some more work to improve my skills before I'm there. Or actually, I think I'm good. Maybe it's giving me some direction of where to apply to. There we go. Designers. So With game design portfolios, there's no need to build a website from scratch altogether. You don't need to be a web developer to also be a game designer. Use whatever is easily accessible. Use Wix, WordPress, Squarespace. Yeah, there's like a million of them, right? Use whatever works, which is free. But really, for designer portfolios, the main thing is to focus on games that you have made, right? Games, levels, mechanics. We want to see something that you have made. A lot of people fall down the route of doing lots and lots of analysis of other people's games in game design. So they'll go, this is what I would do differently if I was designing this that someone else made. And while maybe for an academic piece that could be a really good piece of work, but for looking for a job, it's not particularly useful. What I'd rather you do is just do it. Just if you say this is what you would do, then do it and show it off to us. Show us why. We want to see your skills in designing, a level, mechanic, whatever, right? That's what we really want to see. We want to show that we want you to be able to show off that you understand that. And so, really, the very best thing is something that ideally you can download and we can play. Even if it only takes 30 seconds, whatever, it doesn't really matter. But that would be the very best thing, to be able to show off something that I can very quickly, I can either play online or download or whatever else. Your portfolio needs to be visually appealing. There's also a tendency with design where you can go down a lot of text, right? There's a lot of text. There's a lot of documentation and stuff involved in game design. But your portfolio, once again, is a sales tool, right? So it needs to be visually appealing. I want to see stuff like gameplay videos. I want to see screenshots. I want to see work in progress pictures. I want to see all of this kind of stuff to show your process of how you've got designed whatever it is you're showing off that you've designed. You do want to show off your documentation skills, though, and I guess what I mean by that is, there's a fine balance to be made. So GDDs are huge documents, right? No one's expecting you to provide a massive GDD. Alternatively, nobody's going to read one when you apply for a job. However, you want to show off that you can write, that you can write properly, that you've got those skills. So you want to try to show off a bit of a snapshot of here's a bit of documentation I did for this project or whatever it is, right? Show a snapshot, balance off the level of detail with some conciseness. Also, as well, it's expected that certainly for design is that you're probably going to be working in teams. You're going to do a lot of group projects, right? And that's good. That's a good thing because that's how you work in industry. One thing to take note is that you really want to clearly outline the team size and what you particularly did. If it was a team project where there was 10 of you, for example, I want to know what bit you personally were responsible for, and I will try and ignore as best I can the bits that you were not, because ultimately I'm not hiring the whole team. In the context of this, I'm hiring you, and so I want to know exactly what you did. And so what about other jobs? I hear you all saying. So there are lots and lots of other jobs, right, in the games industry. Way too many to put on a list here. One thing I would say is that they're all career paths in their own right. Previous advice, years ago, would have been to maybe treat stuff like QA as a stepping stone into doing something else. Nowadays, that's not really the case. It's not the advice. QA and other roles are careers in their own right. They're a key part of game development. You can build a lifelong career doing these roles. When it comes to getting these types of roles, it's important that you recognise that even though they exist in the industry, they don't necessarily always exist in every single studio. So we get lots and lots of people. Like the one that I can probably give the best example for is like sound design, right? All video games have sound, right? They're pretty much any game. It's going to have sound. It's going to have sound effects. It's going to have music. It's going to have dialogue. Whatever. And so you assume that every studio has a team of sound designers, doing all this kind of audio stuff. We don't. It's not for us in our games. It's not a humongous part of the game. It's only a small part. We can't justify having a whole team full-time employed. It's something we outsource, and lots of other studios are exactly the same. They'll outsource it, or if they're a big studio, they'll probably have a small team. And what that also means is that even if they have got a team, they might not necessarily have junior jobs, because maybe the really they only need a small team of 3 or 4, and if none of them leave, then they've got no reason to need to grow it. And so it's just being aware that just because you want it to exist doesn't mean it will do in every single studio. But really, when it comes to portfolios for these types of jobs, the key thing is always just going to be showing off examples of what the role is. So showing off, whatever that role does, showing that you understand what it is. So if you want to if you want to design sounds for a video game, create a show reel of sounds that you've designed for a game, right? Take a game, take all the sound out, and redesign the sounds, right? It's that simple. We want you to show off examples of whatever it is that you're applying for. That's really the key thing for portfolios. The other thing is that if you don't have it, you've got time now to try it out. You might go, yeah, I'd love to have a go at doing VFX or some UI UX design or whatever it is, right? And maybe that's not a part of your course, maybe that's not a module that you've taken. It doesn't matter. Do a personal project, have a go at doing something, experiment with it. You might be surprised where you go, I'm not really sure about it, but once you do one project, you go, actually, I enjoyed that. Actually, I'm quite good at it. Maybe I'll change track and maybe I'll pivot and go down that route. Have a go at things. This is why game jams and stuff exist. You can go and experiment, and it's not going to be the end of the world if it all goes wrong. And so, in terms of getting a job at XR Games, I have got another video, but I'm conscious that I'm not sure the audio worked last time. So I'll give it a go, but please let me know if the audio is terrible. So I'm going to quickly show you a very quick interview with one of our junior artists, Emily Derby, who talks about getting her job at XR Games. It's not coming through. It's got captions anyway, so we'll let it play through. I'll send the link through afterwards. It's on YouTube. So I'll send the link through afterwards once I manage to grab it. So everyone will say, yeah, we'll just kind of skip past that. It's not none of it's working. So what about XR Games? How do you get a job here? So there's a couple of kind of myths, I guess, to kind of get over. First of all, you don't need any previous VR experience. So whenever we hire any roles, we never ever look for people who have got VR experience, even though we only make VR games. The reason for that is because it's such a new technology, it's such a new genre of games. Actually, what we'd rather do is just find people who know how to make good video games, and then we can teach them the VR bit. It's never a prerequisite for any of our games. You also aren't plugged in and got a headset on all day. A lot of people got unsure about that. Maybe they feel sick or whatever else. That's not the case. All you put a headset on is to really play test stuff, and that would be maximum of an hour a day, maybe at most. But yeah, it's just like any other game development job. VR has also come a very long way when it comes to that kind of thing. If you're someone who tried VR 5 years ago and got really sick and dizzy and that kind of thing, things are very different with the headsets we've got now. So it's not as bad as you might think. So what does work for us in terms of getting a job? Our employee values are what's really important to us. You'll find them on the job ads and stuff that we put out. But we went through a big consultation period last year, which involved the whole company, where we essentially tried to answer the question of what makes a good XR Games employee, regardless of skill and experience. What makes a good XR Games employee? What are the personality traits? What are the behaviours? What kind of person do we want to work with, and what will work well here? Everybody had a say. It took a few months, and we've now got 6 employee values, which are super important to us. These are things now that are now integrated within everything we do, including hiring. So we will be looking for evidence that you embody these values in the interview questions that we do with you. While you don't need to have had worked in VR, we do expect you to have at least done a little bit of research in terms of VR game development, just show some basic understanding of, maybe how things are different, working on VR compared to working on, console games. What are the difference and limitations and the challenges that we face? We also expect you to have done a bit of research when it comes to our games, understand what our art style is. Once again, goes back to what I was saying before. If you've got super realistic cars, if you look at all the games we've done, we don't have that kind of art style. That's not what we do. So trying to match up with that and show that you understand who we are and you've done a little bit of research. And just generally have an interest in VR. You don't have to have a headset at home. We know it's expensive and all that kind of stuff. But YouTube exists. You can watch people play it. Just at least show that you've got a little bit of interest in VR is really cool. I really like it. And so, look, what can you expect? So I'm now going to kind of cover really much more about the recruitment process and actually what you can expect when you are looking for a job. So what I'm going to first do is break down what that job application process might look like. And this isn't necessarily specific to XR Games. This is general, right? This is taking my almost 10 years experience in recruitment and what you can probably expect when you are looking for a job. So you'll begin by preparing materials. So this would be, you'd make a CV, you'd be building your portfolio. It's probably where you're at right now for a lot of people. You then go and find some jobs. So they might be on job boards, they might be on websites for studios, might be on LinkedIn, social media, all of that kind of stuff. You then apply for said jobs. FYI, there's a chance you might not hear back. Whether that's good or bad, right? I'm not here to defend other people, but I'm just letting you know the reality is that for a lot of places you might not hear back. You might just be a black hole. You might never get a reply, and you will get a reply from XR Games, even if it's just a sorry, no thanks. But for a lot of places you won't hear back. Don't take it personally. It's just the way that things work in the world, I'm afraid. But you are very unlikely to get feedback. So if you just apply for a job anywhere and it's just a straight no with no interview or nothing, chances are you're probably not going to get detailed feedback as to why it's a no. Right? You're at that stage. There will be hundreds of people who get exactly the same answer at that stage for junior jobs. And so you can by all means ask, but I'll just manage your expectations that you probably won't get back. You might get invited in for an interview. It could be multiple stages, could be one stage, depends on the studio, depends on the role, depends on the manager, depends on lots of different things. There could be a task or a test involved at some point. Once again, it depends on the studio, depends on the role, depends on the manager. There's no one rule for everything. And then you'll get an offer. And it all sounds good, right? And that's all pretty straightforward and linear. Go through those steps, bang, 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 job sorted. Now the problem is that in reality, you might get all the way to applying, and you don't get invited to interview for any of the jobs that you've applied for. So you have to go back and you have to find some more jobs, do some more research, find some more companies to apply to. It might be that you apply to loads of places, you don't get any interviews, and you kind of come to the realization that, well, clearly something's not working. Something's not right with my CV, with my portfolio. I'm not getting to an interview stage. So you might have to go back and prepare your materials again. You might have to go, I need to make some changes. I need to do something. it might be that you get to interview and you don't get the job. Just because you got an interview doesn't mean you get the job. There's probably, for every job, there's probably at least five people on an interview shortlist. 4 of them don't get the job, and so it could be that, and you could so you then have to go back and apply for more jobs based on some of the feedback that you get. The feedback may be that actually, there's actually some big changes that you need to make. So actually, you might get all the way through to an interview and then not get the job, but get some really, really valuable feedback that says you need to work more on this, you need to do more of this, you're not quite ready yet. And so you'd have to go back all the way back to the beginning and start preparing your materials and changing things and that kind of thing. I guess what I'm trying to get across is that while it might seem straightforward and linear, the reality is that it can be very difficult. It can be very messy to get a job in the games industry. It's important for you to keep track of things. It's important for you to be aware this is going to happen. Don't take things too personally if you don't get it. If you don't get a job, all of these things allow you to kind of take a step away and treat it as a process and try and learn at every single stage. And so there's a number of different things that you need to get a job as well, and they all have they all play a different role and have a different purpose, and they might not necessarily be the purpose that you immediately think they are. So you need a portfolio, right, to get a job in game development. We've kind of talked about this a lot today. Your portfolio is the thing that gets you an interview, right? So when you apply for a job, as I said, first thing someone will look at will be a portfolio. Now, if the portfolio matches up with the requirements of the job, there's a pretty strong chance that you're going to be shortlisted for an interview. It doesn't get you a job; it gets you an interview. You might do a task or a test, right? Sometimes depends on the studio. And what this could do, this would demonstrate the skill that you have. So whether it's a coding test or it's an art test or whatever else, right? The reason why those things are being done is because they want to evaluate your skills on a specific task, specific type of thing. They want to see how do you do with this. And so you're doing a task or test is the thing that shows that you've got the skills, but doesn't get you a job. You'll have a CV, and on your CV, you'll have details of your experience in making video games and of your education and game jams and general experience in game development. And what this does is it provides the bulk of the conversation at interview. So when you are in an interview, it's not like you see on TV and movies a lot of the time, right? It's not question answer, question answer, question answer. That's not how things work in reality. It's much more of a conversation, and most of that conversation is around this. It's about, tell me about this project, and it's talking through what you've previously done, what projects you've done, what would you do differently next time, what have you learned from it, all of this kind of stuff. On your CV as well, you'll also have maybe personal details about you. So you might have a mission statement about what you want to do career-wise. You might have some interests about your hobbies and your interests, what you do outside of work, what kind of stuff you're into. But what this does is it makes you a real person. So this may not seem as important as the others, but I can tell you right now, it definitely is. Being a real person helps you convert that interview to a job, and I'll explain more in the next couple of slides as to why that is. But this makes you a real person. We don't hire robots yet. AI hasn't taken everybody's jobs. We hire people who work with other people, and we want to know who you are as a person, as well as how good you are at doing art or whatever it is. And then good comms and interviewing skills. And what this does is it shows that you can fit within the team. Now, what I don't mean by this, and a lot of people assume, is that this means you need to be really outgoing, really kind of, not really extroverted, able to talk to anyone, go around a room, all that kind of stuff. That's not what I mean. What I mean is you need to be able to communicate. You need to be able to talk through your work and explain what your work is. You need to be able to listen. You need to be able to ask questions. You need to be able to show that you've done some research with the interview and that you understand what the role is. All of these things, are not necessarily things that are particularly extroverted, in a one-to-one setting or an interview. But if you turn up to the interview and you give one-word answers and you don't really explain things, that's really not showing that you're going to fit well and you're not going to work well with other people, because it's very much a collaborative environment. Games is a team effort a lot of the time, right? You work with a big group of other people, and you have to be able to explain your work, justify your work, talk about what changes you've made, talk about how you can help each other. These are really key things that are looking to find out in people who are applying for a job. I think if it's not plainly obvious, the point I'm trying to get across is that individually, these don't get you a job. And this is where a lot of people fall down, because where most people will focus their time is on this first point, right? People will focus 90% of their time on building their portfolio. But having a really good portfolio goes back to right at the beginning where I was talking about being a good artist, being a good coder, a good designer, does not get you a job. It's not the whole thing. There are lots of people who are great and have great portfolios who do not get a job, and that's because they're terrible at all these other things. They don't get through. They might get lots of interviews and not get any jobs. So I would really have a think about dedicating time to every single area on this list in the hopes of getting a job. All of these things will increase your chances. And so what do things look like from my side? Okay. And so this kind of funnel here is intended to kind of show you really the kind of process that you can expect to go through. So at the top, you'd have your applicants. And as I mentioned, for junior roles, genuinely, it will be hundreds for junior roles. I can give you a couple of examples. Recently, we just hired a junior QA tester. I put a job ad, I advertised a job. Within 24 hours, I took the job down because it had over 250 applications. That's in just 24 hours. We hired, we are currently in the middle of hiring interns. The applications closed just before Christmas. We're hiring 3 interns this year. We had almost just under 3,500 applications for internships. And we are not, a really big famous studio, right? We are, a lot of people might not have heard of us. These numbers are not uncommon. This is the reality of what you're dealing with. So when we say it genuinely could be hundreds, I really mean it. Right, that's the top of the tree. That's the really top of the funnel. So what I'm doing then is I'm filtering to a long list. So I'm trying to filter down to a long list and then filter down to a short list of people, which is where maybe there could be a test involved. Maybe a task could be involved. What we're trying to understand is who can we filter down to invite in for interview. We can't invite 200 people to interview. We might be able to invite 5 or 6. How do we get to that number? We have to do this filtering. This is where you get your 30 seconds on the long list. Then you get a second look, and then maybe a third look. And there's different stages you have to go through to be able to get to a point where you go, yes, this is a good group of people that we want to interview. And then you get an offer. And throughout this process, there's 3 key questions that I'm asking throughout the different stages of this. So at the beginning, what I'm asking is who's relevant, right? So from those applicants, when I'm filtering down to a long list, what I'm doing there is filtering out all the people who are totally irrelevant. This would be people who just applied for anything with the word, any job with the word junior in it, right? This would be someone who's applied for something that quite clearly they've got no idea what it is. Do you know how many people who apply for a job as a junior artist who are currently working as a sandwich artist at Subway? It's very common. That kind of stupid stuff like that, we filter all that out. It would also be where you'd be filtered out if you don't have a portfolio. Right, that'd be the stage we are filtered out. You're not. I don't know if you're relevant or not. I don't know if you're applying for a junior character artist. I expect to see a portfolio with some character art on it. Right, bare minimum. So this is a bit filtering out who is totally irrelevant to the job. Then what we're doing when we're getting to the interview stage and we're doing more filters to a shortlist, what we're doing is we're asking who could do the job. So who technically on paper, without having met them yet, who technically could do the job. So this is where maybe, your test or your task might be involved to test where their skills are, be where we have a much deeper look at your portfolio. By the time we get to that interview stage, there could be 5 or 6 people. On paper, all of you technically could do the job. You wouldn't be terrible. If we just hired you right now today, chucked you some work, you probably have a pretty good bash at it. Right? Technically, you know what you're doing. You've used the right tools. You've probably done a little bit of this before in either uni work, personal projects, whatever it is, but you technically can do the job. And so what that begs is, what's the last question, right? We've got 5 people who could all do the job, but we can only hire one of them. What we're asking is, who's the best fit? Of that 5, who is the one that we want to work with? Who's the best fit for our team? Who's the best fit for the company? And this is where all of that soft skill stuff comes in. It's where all your comms comes in. It's where being a real person comes in, because ultimately we are hiring people to work with other people. And so when you're all on a fairly level playing field when it comes to actually being able to do the job, what we're really focusing on is, right, who do we want to invest our time in? Who do we want to invest our resources in? Who do we think is not going to disrupt the team? All of this kind of stuff is really what could swing things, turning that interview into an offer. I will skip over the video because I'll share it once again. I'll share a link, but there's a video of our current interns who are with us. They're about just over 6 months into their placement year with us at the minute, talking about what they found as an intern. But I'll share some links afterwards so you can share it around with people. And so, look, to finish off, I guess I need to talk about the elephant in the room, right? Anyone who's aware of games, will probably be aware of everything that's been going on for the last, it feels like forever at this point, with layoffs, right? And look, cards on the table. When I was agreeing to come and do this talk, Rob asked me, he's like, "Can you talk about the layoffs? Can you give some kind of reassurance that it's not as bad as it is?" And to be honest, it's really super hard to do it. Right? Let's be transparent about it. I'm not going to sugarcoat things too much. Industry over the last 2 years or so, and they continue to be. Yesterday, big chunk of people lost their job yesterday, or about to lose their job. I'm going to try and give you some context and how it can be personal to you in terms of entry level stuff, right? So, first of all, let's address why it's happening. And look, there's probably lots of other reasons, stuff that I don't know. I'm not the authority on everything, but this is what I can observe, right? You can attribute a lot of it to a COVID hangover. So when the pandemic happened, when everyone worked from home, the games industry was one of the only industries that thrived. More people were at home more often. More people were buying games more often. More people were playing games more often. And business was good. Executives were happy. We're making loads of money. We need to hire more people. And there was a huge overhiring across the board in the games industry over that period. Massive. And then the problem, is that, well, since that stopped, right, since we've got back to some kind of normalcy, there's been a lot of people who have returned to work. Either they were maybe made, they were off work completely, or maybe they were working from home temporarily and then now back into an office or whatever they were doing, right? A lot of people have gone back to work, and you combine that with, we're now in the middle of a big cost of living crisis, and spending 70 quid on a game is now a much more considered purchase than maybe it was previously. All of this combined mean that the sales are less. We're not selling as much. There's not as much demand as there was during the pandemic. On top of that, interest rates are all over the show across the board. I won't go into too much detail about this because it's all super complicated, and I'll be honest, I don't really understand it. Interest rates are over the board, and that spooks investors, right? People are not so willing to chuck a load of money at making video games than they were maybe a couple of years ago when business was really good. And then what you also do is you can combine that with, if you look at the life cycles now, particularly of big AAA games, right? So nowadays, to make a big AAA game, you're talking minimum 6-7 years maybe of development time, maybe even longer for some. That's huge. That's hugely expensive. It costs millions, and it's only and the expectations of consumers are in terms of graphics quality and all this other stuff. are getting more and more demanding as the years go on. And so what they were doing 5 years ago is now not good enough. And so actually it's now extending the time. It's taking a long time. And then what you then also do is combine that with, well, actually consumer tastes are changing a lot. What consumers really wanted 5 years ago, they don't necessarily want right now. Now we want different types of games. And so by the time a game gets released, it's almost already out of date. It's already kind of past. And so you're seeing a lot of big games getting released with a lot of hype and not doing particularly well. All of this combined is really why the industry, in my eye, why the industry is in a bit of a state as it is. Why there are so many people being laid off. And it's not nice, and it's not good. There's a lot of people who are losing their jobs. But look, I'll try and put a positive spin on things for everyone here. So there's a couple of key things. The biggest cuts are not in core game development, right? So when it comes to art, programming, design, those kind of core areas, for example, of game development, don't get me wrong, there are still lots and lots of cuts, but the biggest cuts are in those which are not. So it's with publishers or tech providers. You see huge amounts of cuts and layoffs with the likes of Unity, for example, or with big tech companies. It's also hugely effective in support positions like mine, right? So recruitment, HR, marketing, all of these things are affected massively with this, and much more. It's also much less likely to affect junior positions as it does senior. And once again, I'll caveat all of this with this is not the rule, right? There are still juniors who are being made redundant, right? That's still a thing. And still a lot of people. But generally, there's more seniors being made redundant than there is juniors, right? They're more expensive. Their salaries are more expensive. And so when they're looking at cutting costs, because of all the things I outlined, they cut the most expensive costs. You'll also find that independent studios are affected less than your really big corporate ones. So we're an independent studio, right? We're not owned by some big conglomerate. We are less affected than somebody who's got loads of big stakeholders and are a huge organization employing thousands of people. It doesn't affect us as much, but it still does affect people who are like us. So I guess the key thing is do your research, understand the kinds of companies that you're applying for, understand maybe what the risk is. Is the risk high because of the kind of studio they are? Be aware of what their structure is and how they're built. And this might not be a comfort to a lot of people, but I'm speaking to people that this has happened before, right? This is not a brand new thing. The games industry has gone through these cycles previously. Maybe not as bad as what it is right now. Maybe it is particularly bad, but it has happened before. There's been waves of people being laid off. And off the back of that, opportunities arise. You will see in the news a lot of the time new studios being launched. There will be people who are really experienced people who are working at big studios who have been there for 20 years or whatever, and they've been laid off. And rather than going to work at another big studio, they go, do you know what, I think I'm just going to do my own thing. And so they form their own thing. And those studios, while there might only be a very small handful of people working for them, maybe one-man bands right now, in 5 years' time, they then become the mid-sized studios, right? Who are employing 50, 100 people. So opportunities do arise for new studios and new ways of working from the ground up off the back of this. And I guess the key thing for all of you is that it should be a key part of your interview prep and of your questions. Don't shy away from it. So if you do get invited to interviews, if you do get invited to screening calls or to whatever, to any studio, you should be asking about this kind of stuff. How has your studio been affected by this? Have you had to go through any process? Don't shy away from it. Everybody's fully aware of it, and it's not taboo to talk about this kind of stuff. I've also included just a couple of kind of screenshots there. So there's a ton of resources out there. I'm not going to list resources here. The bottom one is from there's a website, I can't remember what it's called, but it's like gamesindustrylayoffs.com or something like that. It basically lists all the layoffs that's happened. And this is kind of going back to the point I was saying about indies and game development being less affected. These are, in 2023, the companies that made the biggest amount of cuts over the year. And you'll see here, you've got Unity, ByteDance, Embracer, Epic, and Amazon. All huge, massive, big conglomerates, big tech companies, big publishers. They are being affected much more than an indie game development studio. And then at the top, what I've got is ahead of this, I ran a quick search on LinkedIn. LinkedIn Recruiter. Anyone who works in recruitment, we have kind of advanced search filters and stuff on LinkedIn. And so I did a quick search just to see, and it was looking at people who are based in the UK, who work in the games industry, who are currently open for work, which means they're looking for a job. And if you look here, we can see how it's listed it by years of experience. And so there are a lot more people who have got 5 to 10 years experience, more than 10 years experience, compared to the bottom two are those who have got 1 to 2 years experience and those with less than 1 year experience. So you can see how it's disproportionate in terms of there's a lot more people looking for jobs who have got loads of experience and are much more expensive in terms of salaries and all that kind of stuff. It hasn't affected juniors as much. But I say I will take everything I say over a pinch of salt. None of this is this is all just my opinion, really. But I'm trying to put a positive spin on it for you all to show that you should still, if games is still your passion, don't let this put you off. Right, you should still try and pursue it as much as you can and take the advice that I've given. So let's just summarize everything here. So, look, I guess first of all, be prepared for it to be hard. I've probably made it pretty clear. It's really hard to get a job in games, right? It's super loads of competition. Everyone's being laid off. The industry's on fire. It will be hard, right? Just because you've done a degree, that does not mean that you're entitled to work in the games industry. Competition is super, super high. Right? It may seem super negative, and it may seem like, oh, what's the point? But there are people who get jobs in the games industry every year, new jobs, junior jobs, graduate jobs, internships. These jobs do exist, and people get them, and so it does happen, and it can happen to you. You mostly only ever hear about the success stories, so you will see. Certainly, universities are particularly guilty of this, right? Is that they'll find case studies of a student who graduated last year, and they do a big thing on who's now got a job, right? And they're working at whatever studio, right? And they'll make a massive song and dance and do loads of promoting. Hey, look at this person. They graduated last year. They're now working here. Look how great they are. We did our job really, really good. And that's great. Great story to tell. Really cool. But going back to kind of something I said earlier is that's the minority of people. For most people, that doesn't happen. For most people, that doesn't happen straight away. They don't get their job immediately straight afterwards. You really only ever hear about those success stories. They're the ones which are shouted about the most. Whereas most people, it can take time. They finish uni, they finish their course, and then they have to continue working and developing. They have to continue building their portfolio. It might take another 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, whatever, right? Those ones are not talked about so much, but they are actually the majority. So if you are in that position, don't feel too disheartened because you hear about Joe Blogs who graduated and then started their dream job at their dream studio the next week, because that is the smallest of smallest minority of people. And the best preparation for making games as a job is to just make games. Get involved in making games as much as possible, whether that's uni work, personal projects, game jams. Just the more reps you get in terms of making video games and doing whatever particular skill you're looking to do, that is going to be the thing that helps prepare you for getting paid to do it properly. And finally, as I've mentioned, treat your career in games as a journey, and it's one that you've already started. You are already there in the industry, and you're already on that first step of the ladder. Treat it as a journey, take it step by step, and you'll give yourself the best chance of getting to wherever you want to get to. And that's me. Thank you very much. I'm happy to do any questions and stuff.
Thank you very much, Andy, with a say glowing insight into what the industry is currently going through, and also how graduates and anybody looking for work in games industry, what they're up against. First question that I'm going to pick from the comments is something very similar to what I was going to ask of you anyway, Andy, and that is this one here from Laz. Given the high competitive state of the industry, would it be advisable to present portfolios as a multi-aspected to provide flexibility to companies' needs in terms of cost or efficient multiple roles? So I think what they're trying to get at there is a generalist portfolio something that you're going to be wanting to see?
Probably not. The reality is that you get a lot of people who say, yeah, I can do the art, I can do the coding, I do the design, I do the sound, I do everything, right? And that's great. But when that could be great if you're working at a really small place, right? And you're doing your own thing, you're doing your own freelance thing, you're doing your own project, that kind of thing. But we don't hire those kind of people. If we don't hire generalists who can do a bit of everything. We hire people to do a specific part of the game development process. So if we're hiring a junior artist or a junior character artist, right, to be specific, then we want to know that you can do character art. What you'll find generally with people like this who go, yeah, I can do all this kind of stuff, is that actually they can probably do all that kind of stuff pretty average, and they're not particularly, very good at any of them. And that doesn't work. You can't dedicate the amount of time to be good enough at one of those things to get hired. And that's what you'll find a lot of the time. There's lots and lots of people who fall down that route of going, I know how to make games, I can do every part of games, but we don't hire those people. So I would say find the area that you really want to do, that you're good at, whatever it is, and focus on being the best you can be at doing that bit.
Just a lead-on question with that, Andy. Looking at somebody that wants to continue developing, whether they've left university, not in university, wherever really. You talked about sort of how difficult it is to potentially even get feedback outside of there. Where would you say the best place to get feedback is for somebody that doesn't necessarily have access to it on a daily basis?
So the great thing about the games industry in general is that it's a proper community in terms of an industry, right? In that there are a lot of people who love to give back and love to help other people. There are organisations like Grads and Games, where I used to work. There are organisations like Into Games, like Limit Break, Mentorship. Like there are tons of these different organisations that are there to really facilitate people to get help. And so if it takes a bit of work from your side. You can't just expect it just all to come to you. It might take you reaching out to a number of people. If you're an artist, reaching out to people on ArtStation and saying, "Hey, would you mind having a quick look at my work?" That's not uncommon. People do that, and generally in the games industry, compared to other industries that I've worked in, people are much more open to helping and giving back, and that much more of a community feel. So you can get feedback. I would just say have the attitude of not expecting it a lot of the time. People are busy, people have work, people have other stuff, right? They don't have to give you feedback. So always be super thankful if someone does. But there's no harm in reaching out to a bunch of people and seeing if you can get something back. Being aware of all the different groups and the different events and stuff that go on in the industry, and trying to be active as much as possible. It will give you more opportunities to get feedback on your work. So there are opportunities out there. You just have to kind of do a little bit of work to find them out and speak to people.
So it's great, Andy, that you showed us sort of an insight as to what a recruiter is looking for, because obviously that's not necessarily always going to be talked about, certainly in sort of universities or other places really, because most people are either artists, designers, programmers, or formal ones trying to move the next sort of generation into that area. So when it comes to recruitment, how can somebody give the best opportunity to stand out to a recruiter like yourself?
It's just it's showing off showing off that you've got the skills, experience, showing that you can demonstrate whatever is needed for that particular role. Every role is individual, right? Every role is individual. Um, if I'm looking for something, if I'm looking for a junior programmer, and it's C# and Unity and whatever, that's what I'm expecting to see. Because there is such a huge amount of people, we're in a very fortunate position where we don't need to really look at transferable stuff across a lot of the time. We can be picky. We can pick for exactly the skills that we want, and that sounds really bad and harsh, but this is the reality of it, right? And so, the things that stand out is showing that you have a you've shown that you can do the thing you've applied for, that you're not just applying for anything and everything. We can spot those a mile away. But then also that you've shown that you've you've understood the role and you've understood the company that you've applied for. There's little things like personalizing cover letters and all this kind of stuff. Do you know what I mean? It's more of like, if you get that wrong, that's the thing that stands out. Um, you know, so it's having that personalized approach, doing more research, making sure that you are applying for things that are relevant with the right materials that are relevant for the job.
So I'm just going to sort of pivot to one of the comments that's in here, and one of them is asking, is it a good thing in order to do a master's degree or something like that to stay around a community and work on your craft?
It depends. It's the only answer. I would never. I can't stand here today and advise everyone. Yes, you should do a master's degree, and you should spend X thousands of pounds on going and doing a master's degree. For some people, it would be beneficial. For others, it won't. It would be a waste of time. It's entirely personal to you in terms of where you're at, in terms of your development. For some people, they they need that extra guidance, and they're gonna they need that. For other people, they won't need that. Either they are ready and they're good now, or they're much better at kind of self-directed learning, and actually they can top up their skills with whatever they find on YouTube and ArtStation and all sorts of places, right? There's no, but having a master's degree isn't a big star on an application to go, this is a grade A candidate because they've got a master's degree. Quite frankly, the degree, the course that you do, and the grade that you get is entirely irrelevant to me. I don't care. I don't care where you studied. I don't care what grade you got. I don't care what course you did. It doesn't matter. If you've got a portfolio that shows the right skills and shows the right specifics of what the role is, that's what I'm looking for. Doesn't matter how you learned it. Now, the reality is that for a lot of people, the way to learn and develop and have the time to do the skills is to go to uni and go to the places that do it better than others, right? But having a master's degree doesn't make you a better candidate overall. It's not a green flag to go, this is a good person. It's it's entirely personal to you.
So I'm gonna bring my co-host Stephen in. You speak to a lot of students every day within your job role, as do I. What are the kind of comments, or what are the kind of questions that you hear most common? And are there any that you think that Andy might be able to give us some more insight into, perhaps? We're muted again, unfortunately. It doesn't seem as if the audio is coming through. So one thing that we do hear a fair amount from students is, what's the next thing? If I don't receive a job offer within the first sort of month of me looking, how can I be in a position to not be pestering companies, but also casting out my net enough to be able to give myself the best chance? We always say that there's a particular amount of time that they should be really considering as a standard, and you've sort of alluded somewhat to that, Andy, earlier on within your chat. But is there a typical amount of time that you see within people's applications that they have been waiting, or is it something of a
So
general conversation relating onto the skills of the individual?
I think where a lot of people assume is that, and this sounds, I realise how bad this sounds, right, and how arrogant this makes me sound, right. I very much appreciate it, but a lot of people will assume that we will remember you, that you applied 6 months ago, and I'll remember you. I probably won't. You know, there are so many people who are applying for these roles. There are so many people who are sending follow-up LinkedIn messages, sending emails, all of this kind of stuff. That it's just all part of the noise. I won't necessarily remember. If there was nothing particular to remember, then I'm not going to remember. So applying again later is going to be fine. You know, it's not like I'm going to go, oh, not this guy again. But the one thing to be aware of is that um, the way that we process candidates, and any job, any company, you have something called an ATS, which is a piece of software that a recruiter uses. It's called an applicant tracking software. And so when you apply for a job, your details get pulled into here, and then that's how you schedule interviews, and you look at CVs, and you move people along a process, and all this kind of stuff. Now, with most of them, including ours, it will flag up duplicates. So when you apply for a job, um, when I go down the list and I click on it, it will flag up with a yellow banner at the top that says this person applied for this job on this date. This is a duplicate, and I can then go and have a look at it. Now the key thing is generally that's mostly fine, but for juniors, what I'm expecting is if you applied 6 months ago and it was a no, and we didn't shortlist you for an interview for that job, if you're applying for pretty much the same job that's come up again 6 months later, and there's been no change to anything you're doing, right? If I can see that you've done nothing in terms of development in that time. If there's no new stuff on your portfolio, if there's nothing new on your CV, like if it's just exactly the same documents, exactly the same experience, I'm like, well, why would I consider you now when I didn't when we already made the decision 6 months ago? If you have, if you've developed further, and if you've gone away and you've added new stuff or whatever else, we should be able to see that pretty easily. I go, oh, that wasn't there the last time we looked at it, and so that's where people will fall down, is where they won't continue developing, and they won't continue getting better. The amount of time is totally irrelevant, which is why what you'll find is that you get lots of people who finish uni and then they don't continue developing. They go, I'm finished, I'm done, I know what I'm doing now. And then they'll get to 2-3 years later and they're still applying for jobs. And you'll look at it and you go, what have you done the last 2 years? Because clearly you didn't get a job 2 years ago. You weren't good enough at that point, to get a job. So what have you done since then? If you've done nothing, then well, what makes you think that you're good enough now? And so it's it's continuous personal development. It's going, well, since then, over the last 6 months, I've been following this course, or been following doing this stuff on YouTube. I've been taking part in this game jam. I've been working on this personal project. There's always things that you can do, and it doesn't have to cost you loads of money to go and do it. But you should continue doing stuff if you want to continue trying to apply for the industry.
Yeah, so applying yourself in that case. And there's another question here, Andy, coming through, which is, as someone who has had a separate career before changing to games, how do you explain how you left a job that was a negative without being negative, which may be a put off to an employer? And I want to kind of personally add a little bit more to that and say, how can you do your best to explain the way in which you've altered your career? How do we spin this as a positive? Would you not want to hear about this as a recruiter?
So the thing the thing that we wouldn't want to hear or see is no explanation. Right. And so the same thing applies to people. I got asked this question this morning, actually. The same thing applies to people who have had small stints on their CV. So maybe there's a lot of people who have now been made redundant from 2 jobs in the space of 18 months, right? And so traditionally, when you look at their CV and they go, well, I worked here for 6 months and I worked here for 4 months, and now I'm looking for a job again, usually that would be a red flag. Well, hang on a minute, my own jobs. And the key thing with that, and the key thing with this, is if you don't explain it, we will assume the worst, right? So being upfront and being transparent as to why there's been that change is the right way to go. But yeah, you can, explaining that you didn't get on with management, that it was a cultural mismatch, these kind of ways are fine. It doesn't have to be, I hated that person, they were a dick. It doesn't have to be all of this kind of stuff. You can still do it in a professional way, and we'd expect you to be professional about previous employers. And in terms of career change, it's a good thing mostly. It's a lot more common. People who when I'm 35, and when I was a kid, and I was thinking about what do I want to do grow up, games was not an option. It wasn't a thing. No one talked about that. There was no visibility in that, and so there was not even a consideration of it. And that's the same for a lot of people. That wasn't if they didn't even realise that was an option as a job. And a lot of people don't realise that till later in life, and they've gone had a whole career doing something else, and they've actually had this epiphany and gone, do you know what, this is actually what I really want to do. And they've gone back and they've studied and they've taught themselves whatever it is they want to do, and now this is me applying for a job. And that is a great thing, because you've got just life experience and other skills from other jobs, which can help you in terms of working in games. But it's certainly not something that's looked down upon in any way.
That's it. I mean, we're in an industry that is ultimately competitive, as you expressed within your talk, and also the reason why there's so many courses and things like that are across the country. And it's important, no matter what, for anybody that's on any of these courses or on these journeys towards something in the industry, is making sure that you're practicing in the right areas, being consistent, and also making yourself somebody that is recruitable overall. So thank you very much, Andy, for joining us this afternoon. It's great to hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak, with those that are in control with the recruitment process. So thank you very much for your time, and we'd love to keep chatting in the future. So thanks everybody else for joining us. Our next talk for Fuse Conference will be tomorrow at 10 a.m. For our 4th day. This will be with Edwin Vargas Cortez, Senior Lighting Artist at Electronic Arts. So hopefully we'll see you all then as well. Thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you next time.